Hello, I'm Philip Grindell and I run Defuse Global. And I thought it was just a good time now to sort of introduce myself to some of you and to give you some insight into, I suppose, why this is so important to me, what we're trying to achieve here, and what we are achieving, in fact, in many cases. And just a bit about me so you kind of get to know me a bit better. Any sort of background stuff. So, as I said, my name is Phil Grindell. You can probably tell I'm in my 50s. I'm married to my lovely wife Amanda, the British media have recently kind of labelled me the online bodyguard, which I quite like actually, and I think it's quite apt in terms of what we're achieving. My background is the military and then the Metropolitan Police, where I spent nearly 3 decades before I retired in November 2019. And I retired as a detective inspector. Spent most of my time working on the special operations sort of area of policing. And my kind of last posting, probably most relevant, was that when the kind of tragic murder of Joe Cox occurred in 2016, I got the phone call and was kind of asked in by the head of counter-terrorism and asked to go and set up this team in Parliament, which was called PLATE, the Parliamentary Liaison and Investigation Team, and effectively stop the next Joe Cox, which we did. In fact, we later identified a threat that came in against Rosie Cooper and were the catalyst for the investigation into that, and a really brilliant investigation by the counter-terrorism teams. That's kind of how this all started. When I went into Parliament, it was really interesting because I had no real idea what was going on in terms of the abuse to MPs and threats, and no one else did really either. But I found it fascinating, and I found it kind of plugged into some of the things I was really passionate about around bullying and making people feel vulnerable and scared. And I pretty much spent my life trying to combat that. And that's really why I joined the police in the beginning, 30 years ago, because I wanted to make a difference, and I still do. And so that's why doing what I do now is something I'm so passionate about. In my 30 years, I've worked on domestic violence, I've worked on child abuse, I've worked on murders, I've worked on terrorism, so a pretty broad spectrum. Towards the end, when we were working in Parliament, I became something of a specialist and expert on targeted violence towards public figures. And was fortunate that when I was doing my master's degree, I was able to focus my dissertation on that. And was blessed with going to Harvard University to talk on that subject and interact with some of the real thought leaders on this subject, experts who'd spent their sort of decades researching it. People like Robert Fine, who wrote the exceptional case report by the Secret Service, the US Secret Service, Mario Scolari, Lorraine Sheridan, and many others that kind of shared their knowledge, taught me what I needed to know around targeted violence to public figures. But working in Parliament was an eye-opener, because I really didn't know quite how much hate was directed towards them, how much abuse, and certainly, if you're a female politician, how much sexual violence you're going to be threatened with, and some really awful stuff. I mean, really awful stuff. It takes someone to shock me, but I was pretty shocked by what I saw there. And what happened was that we were so successful that we started getting approaches from outside of Parliament to help them. And we couldn't do that at the time because we were funded by Parliament. But what it did do was identify that there was a gap in the market, particularly in this really niche specialist area of identifying those that pose a threat as opposed to just making a threat. And although I say just making a threat, just making a threat has repercussions, because what I also recognised was that there were some pretty significant psychological effects of these threats, particularly if you're having them repeatedly, if you're a public person and therefore you you have to put on a brave face, but actually when you go into the real world, you're terrified. And so, it really kind of, I recognised that there were other people outside Parliament obviously dealing with the same thing, but no one was really being able to tackle it properly, partly because of a lack of knowledge and expertise, and because it probably hadn't really, kind of came out of nowhere to some degree. And that was our specialism. So that's why in November 2019, I retired from the Metropolitan Police, which I was due to do anyway, and started Defuse quite quickly, because I had a couple of phone calls from some old colleagues of mine who said, look, we've got a couple of threats we need you to help us with, and I was obviously thrilled to do so, and that's how Defuse started. I was then subject to a sort of fair bit of media scrutiny following the really sad death of Caroline Flack, and had the opportunity to go on to Sky News and This Morning with Eamon and Ruth, and appear in the Telegraph, the Mail, the Express, and a few industry papers. And it was actually the Telegraph that labelled me the online bodyguard, which I quite liked, actually. I thought it was quite a good name. So, that really encapsulates what we're doing. And for me, it's still about making a difference. It's about stopping people who are feeling that they are being targeted. It's about helping those people who are genuinely victims of a targeting campaign, in terms of making sure that they're not subject to violence, because that is the key here, that if you don't know what you're looking for, and it is quite specific, and if you don't understand the pathway to violence, if you don't understand the pre-attack warning signals, then you're going to miss something. And equally, if you don't understand the differences between a threat to a politician per se, as opposed to a musician or an actress or what have you, or a chief executive, because they will be different, and there are different methodology and different sort of scientific researched signs that indicate a threat against those people. So not only do those threats inhibit and damage people's performance, they ruin people's reputations if they get it wrong, and they are incredibly dangerous. So that's what we're here for. You can go on the website at diffuseglobal.com and find out more information. Or you'll find me on social media under Philip Grindell or the Online Bodyguard. Any questions, anything you need to know, or any help you think we can give you, please give us a shout. Thank you.